Youth culture today runs on kind of two engines. One is success culture, which is the need to be immediately seen to be successful without any of the process. And then on the other hand, there's humiliation culture, where any mistake, even if it's not a mistake, can be turned into something which defines that person as a joke. And what we find is that the survival response to both of those is something which we're calling BOV culture. Essentially the performance of not caring or being excellently non-excellent. Youth.
Welcome to Inspiring Voices, the podcast of the Sing Up Foundation. We believe in harnessing the power of singing to improve mental health and well-being for children and young people. I'm Celi Barbaria.
And I'm Baz Chapman. We're talking with guests from different areas of practice, research and strategy to make connections and to understand more deeply the unique role of singing, songwriting, voice exploration and creative music making in transforming children and young people's mental health and well-being.
We want to understand better how we can inspire young voices, and especially how children and young people who have particular challenges in their lives which can affect their mental health can be supported through singing and music making. Inspiring Voices, a podcast from the Sing Up Foundation.
Please remember to subscribe and leave us a review on Apple or Spotify. It really will help us to get the word out. Thanks for listening, and now on with the show.
Welcome to Inspiring Voices. I'm Celi Barbaria.
And I'm Baz Chapman, and we are the joint heads of the Sing Up Foundation. This is a special episode because we launched a publication on the 13th of May 2026 and had such a great live webinar that we just had to share it with you.
We had Graham Welch, the Chair of Music Education from the Institute of Education from University College London, Benjamin Turner from Spit Game and Rap Club UK, and also it was chaired and facilitated by our very own Katherine Zeserson, the chair of Sing Up.
So just a little bit about the publication itself. Being seen, being heard, feeling connected is us sharing everything we know about singing and vocal work and its ability to support children and young people's mental health and well-being. And it's come from so many different sources, the conversations we've had, roundtables, research that's out there, hearing from young people and from practitioners, and I guess it's a really honest sharing of what we've learned.
And Baz, I think it'd be really helpful if maybe you could talk a bit about connection theory.
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is one of the main things that came out of it. So mental ill health we know that it can be a cause and be caused by disconnection. And that disconnection can be from self, from connecting with other people, from education and learning, from music making. We also know that singing and vocal work can create connection. It's a really good way of being able to connect with other people and give a focus and promote well-being. So we thought, well, surely you would therefore be able to use the connections that singing can create to help offset some of those disconnections that you get through poor mental health, which places singing in a really interesting position. But you've got to get the conditions right to make that work.
Yeah. And of course, in the publication itself, we talk a lot about what it takes to make those conditions just right. And that's in terms of the space itself, but also the leadership. And there's so many things that go into making sure that environment is perfect. Well, not perfect, but as good as it can be.
Yeah, and the panel really dive into that, I think, and they talk about some of the challenges that young people are facing at the moment, and some of the causes of the challenges of their mental health and well-being, and survival strategies, and things that might come across as really challenging behaviour, but actually it's young people trying to navigate their way through the world. So creating a safe space for singing and vocal work could be really, really important.
And a lot of that is also about leadership. So another thing that's discussed in the publication is the Do No Be framework. Do you want to talk a bit about that too?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the particular environment of working with young people who are in a really difficult place, who have real mental health challenges, obviously is related to general singing and singing for well-being, but it goes much deeper. And there are elements of risk about it. There are elements of therapeutic about it as well. So really understanding what effective practice looks like in that environment not only is important for the young people to get the right kind of an experience, but it's really important for the practitioner to be operating well and in a safe space for them as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, really, there are such amazing, brilliant nuggets of everything in this conversation. So we're super excited to share it with our podcast listeners. So let's just dive in.
Over to Katherine.
So it is my great pleasure to introduce Benjamin Turner, founder of Rap Club and Spit Game, whose work uses rap, beatboxing, and creative vocals to build connection and confidence with young people. Great to see you, Benjamin. And we have Professor Graham Welch, Chair of Music Education at UCL Institute of Education, one of the world's leading researchers on singing and child development, and probably been around Sing Up even longer than me, probably more than 20 years of supporting this journey. So Graham, welcome to you. It's wonderful to see you all here. So we're going to start up with Benjamin is going to give us his take on the report and perhaps wider context. Over to you, Benjamin.
Great, thank you. So with the report, I found the report really aligning with a lot of what I see in the schools and with the young people that I work with. The thing which I found really important was how it focused on the conditions being crucial. And so I wanted to say something about what we're seeing are those conditions that we're up against, as well as the mechanism that we're finding is driving a lot of the behavior and the kind of well-being and youth distress issues at the moment. From what we're seeing, young people today aren't really disengaging from creativity. Rather, they're adapting to an environment where being seen carries a real risk, but also is kind of intrinsic to being and to existing. Youth culture today runs on kind of two engines. One is success culture, which is the need to be immediately seen to be successful without any of the process. And then on the other hand, there's humiliation culture, where if any mistake, even if it's not a mistake, can be turned into something which defines that person as a joke. And you can see that in terms of the content that goes viral and in terms of which young people are gravitated towards. And what we find is that the survival response to both of those is something which we're calling BOV culture, which if you work in a London school, you might have heard young people saying BOV. But essentially the performance of not caring or being excellently non-excellent. And what often teachers, myself included, when I was teaching, would see as disengagement or just being a teenager. What we're finding is more actually a survival strategy of self-preservation. And that's the environment that we're in, where young people are restricting themselves from their creativity and from their kind of openness as a survival mechanism based on the world that they're living in. Another way of looking at it is that we're living in the world of the edit, where young people are navigating a space where everything is filtered, everything is controlled, everything is performative. And again, I highlight that that's not some kind of laziness. It is a survival mechanism within the conditions that the report really excellently highlights. It's why you will see a young person recording a TikTok 20 times and then post it for millions, but will not be prepared to perform in front of their peers in a room. And so what the report, I feel, is showing is is the need for these spaces for unedited space. And one of the most powerful unedited forms is the voice. It's unedited creativity, it's unedited sound, it's unedited kind of process where your voice is you. And that can be both very distressing and in the modern world is really something which young people are even more going to be opposed to, but at the same time is exactly the conditions that we need to support them to learn how to navigate that reality. And I feel that what the report intrinsically is showing is that we need to approach these creative spaces the right way, but they also are arguably the best setup spaces to ask a young person to stop performing, support them in how to remove the mask, but also so that they can learn to put down the mask and to be unedited and to create. Where the conditions are right in that space, young people won't step away from the edit because they're asked to step away from it. They're going to choose to step away because the conditions have made a space where they can be. And unfortunately, in the world that they're living in, they don't have enough spaces to be real. And that's one of the powers of singing, where it is intrinsically a real experience. So that's kind of the finding that I'm finding with it, and how it's giving me a tool to be able to talk about a lot of the issues and the environment that we're seeing for the young people we're working with.
Thank you so much, Benjamin. And I've written so many things down to ask you further about. Graham, over to you. First responses to the report.
Yes, well, this is a very welcome opportunity to reflect on the intrinsic and wider benefits of singing, and also the excellent work of Sing Up and its foundation. We've been researching aspects of children's singing, well-being, and mental health. So reading this report prompted a few thoughts based on my personal and professional experiences. First of all, as a school governor, I recognize that schools are under enormous financial pressure, with increased costs and limited income, challenges with special educational needs, for example. So staff, including senior leadership teams, can also benefit equally from collective singing, such as with their pupils, which can also enhance the sense of being part of this shared community. So it isn't just for the children and the young people, it's also for the adults, and doing it collectively might be just that kind of fun thing which eases some of the tensions of the day and reminds people why they went into education in the first place. I'm also very willing to acknowledge in the report that the repertoire choices, which give pupils voice in all senses, are important to support their engagement, especially during adolescence. And this can reduce something that we often see in schools, this sense of my music or their music, and have a greater sense of our music that we own and share collectively. One other thing is that many years ago, in 1979, a psychologist called Antonovsky offered the concept of salutogenesis, which focuses on the origins of health rather than focusing on the causes of disease and ill health. And one of those in this concept is a sense of coherence, of the world being somehow comprehensible, manageable, enabling us better to deal with life stresses. So we need these kind of generalized as well as specific resistance resources to enable us to look after our health, to be positive. I also like, and I'm delighted to see Benjamin here, that the report stresses that it's voice work, including singing, with many different kind of multi-genre examples. I also remember that young children will engage in songwriting. I can remember this when I was teaching a class of eight-year-olds, and I've been doing some poetry work with them in some creative writing. And this child came out to read the poem, and she said, "Would you like me to sing it?" So I said, "Oh, well, okay, fine," And then several others stood up and said, "Oh, well, I can sing mine as well." And I suddenly realized that these children were creating poetry, and they had melodies in their heads as they were creating these. So, our kids are musical, aren't they? The research that I've been doing for the Voces 8 Foundation on children's singing, health and well-being suggests that if singing is a normal part of the air that children breathe, it becomes part of who they are, part of their collective identity, which is what Howard Goodall's talking about in this text. And it's also likely to have a preventative role in mental health, supporting a sense of positivity, a sense of belonging and community. And last but not least, picking up one of the other comments in the report, 3 colleagues from the university sector, Spiro, Duncan and Cross, have just published new research in the Journal of Consciousness Studies. And they found that there was no meaningful link between musical accuracy and social connection. So what matters is not singing well, but singing together. So
Thank you. Thank you, Graham. Again, so much to prompt and stimulate our thinking. So I've got a couple of things I'd like to put back to you all three just for chat, for conversation, and then we're going to start taking questions from our audience here. So one of the things I'd like to just bring in, and you gave me the perfect segue there, Graham, actually, so thank you for that, is the relationship between the music and the practice of the music. Okay, so if we can see singing and voice work in the context of this report as a practice in which we are engaged. And you could see music as the content of that practice, or you could also see it as the territory for that practice. So you could say that what is asked of us when we sing together is that we engage in behaviors and practices of connection, of listening, of all the things that are articulated in the report. And the territory in which we're doing that is music making. We could also say that there are some very particular qualities of songwriting and text when we bring the meaning making of words to bear on the situation, and so on and so on. I guess my question here is, does the music matter? Does it matter what the music is? And in what ways does it matter, and to whom? And how does the music aid or impede the kind of impact that we're hoping to bring around? I'm going to start with you, Benjamin, and then Baz, and then Graham.
Yeah, I think that's a really important and surprisingly complex question. I think the music doesn't matter until it matters too much to the facilitator. But I specifically am talking about the facilitator.
Yeah.
So the approach that I take with the work that we do, we make films as well as doing music. So we're kind of just a creative hub, and the whole approach is youth leadership and youth led. And so for me, for example, I wanted to do a jazz club at the beginning. Young people weren't particularly engaging with that, didn't really want to do that. They wanted to do rap. And what I had to do was to step back and recognize, as much as I, at the time, had no idea anything about rap, it was my responsibility to facilitate that space. And so, yeah, in that way, young people being given the opportunity to lead and explore what music means to them and what creativity means, that is where the music itself doesn't matter. But the moment that the space or the facilitator of the space starts to define what music should be done or is welcome, whether or not that's intended, simply pushing for, right, this is a piece of music we're going to do, you're saying quite a lot about what that space is welcoming, what that space is prioritizing, valuing. And the implication of that isn't a spoken implication, but for a young person, it can make them feel, okay, this part of me or this part of my culture is maybe not welcome here, or I don't actually feel aligned to this piece of music, so I'm going to disengage a little bit. Or this piece of music just doesn't feel cool, and I don't want to be seen doing this piece of music, and therefore I don't want to engage. So on that side, it can matter a lot, but I think the easiest route out of it is ultimately giving leadership to the young people themselves, and us recognizing the music doesn't matter to and shouldn't matter to us, while recognizing it does matter to them.
Great, thank you. A very clear view. Baz, where do you take this point?
Yes, I suppose it depends on the intention. I mean, I know plenty of choral leaders, who are more sort of, here is a group that will learn and rehearse a number of items and possibly perform them. And there are well-being or groups that have a well-being intention about them that do that. I think it's when it becomes something that is either dealing with young people where for whatever reason they're not connecting with that, or where you are having an intention which is more potentially, I hesitate to say therapeutic because we're not talking about music therapy, but where the intention is more about creating a change for those young people, helping to address something that they might be struggling with in their lives. That's where the really skilled practitioner has a range of directions that they can go in. And very occasionally that might be their own introduction of something. But as Benjamin said, it's connecting with what works for those young people. And I would just finish it by saying that one of the main aspects that we talk about with connection theory is that it's all very well saying, well, these connections with singing help to offset these disconnections with mental health issues. But if you don't get the connection right with the young people in the first place, and make them feel like that music is for them and that they belong in that space, then you're never going to achieve those other things. And our podcast with Benjamin, which I would recommend people have a listen to, called Finding Connection, explores all of that and how he went through that journey of going, here's what I think young people are like. Oh, they don't. Okay, how am I going to make this work?
Thanks, Baz. Another way of seeing it. And I think it's worth just at this point to re-emphasize a point you make super clearly in the report, which is that you're particularly interested in exploring that what you've described in the report as the tier 3 circumstance. This is where young people's experience of mental ill health is becoming acute or is in some way disconnecting them from their ability to thrive. So this is more than thinking about generalized well-being. It's thinking about facilitation of emergence from or healing through or in something more extreme, perhaps, than that. Graham, your thoughts?
Well, children and young people will always appreciate the fact that you value their music, whatever their music is, the music that they're experiencing and enjoying, and that bringing that into a school setting is a very positive thing. At the same time, if you are involved in education, your role is to develop, extend, is to educate. And so that you're also going to be taking the opportunity to draw parallels perhaps with other music or to offer up other examples that the children haven't come across.
What a richness of responses. I will add a thought, and then I'm going to go over to you, Celi. I know that we've got some questions in the chat that there may be some that relate to this question of repertoire, and we may broaden out as well. I just wanted to just share a sort of reflection come provocation, I suppose, which is that if we are taking the view, which I think I would support, that your connection theory proposition is explaining a little bit about why singing might be of support and benefit in this context, then there is probably more to ask about the music than simply whether or not young people like it or whether or not it gives them a sense of agency. There may be more to ask about music itself as a medium and the impacts of sounds and combinations of sounds and rhythms and grooves and the ways in which music itself is a physical force that we relate with and relate to. And I know that's a whole other it's a whole other report. It's a whole other research project. But I think it is interesting because music can disturb us very much. And some people are very disturbed by some kinds of music at a really visceral level. So if we're curating a collective space and we're trying to curate everyone's sense of belonging and everyone's sense of agency and everyone's capacity to grow and heal in a place of connection, we've got to somehow manage that too, that the choices we all make impact on one another. And there may be something more to be learned about the music itself as a material. So I have a question for the panel, please. Should well-being be an explicit part of music education? And if so, how do you think that should be done? Okay, who'd like to kick off on this one?
I'm happy to jump in. Yeah, no, my perspective is that it really shouldn't be explicitly part of it. I think as soon as young people feel like they're in a therapeutic space, that shifts what that space can be. And I think one of the most impactful elements of creative spaces is that they are doing the therapeutic work without having to feel or sound therapeutic. At the same time, I think that the practitioner should be aware of what the overall work is doing and how it is supporting well-being and the responsibility that carries, and the responsibility to not make a young person feel observed by opening up creatively. So I think it is intrinsic, but it shouldn't be made explicit, if that answers the question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Baz, Graham, any thoughts on that question
Um,
about well-being in education?
yes, this is a really interesting one where we've been thinking about, like, i- if there is a case, say within a school or within a group of schools, for saying, okay, there are these young people who are struggling, whatever we might define that as, what could we provide that is more focused for them? How do you do that in a way that doesn't say, you've got a problem, come here, we're going to fix it for you? Even though music making might be a really appealing thing. And I don't think we necessarily got the answer to that, but I will pick up on something that Graham said, which is that if you are going to be overt about it, get them involved in the design and understanding the research interest in it, rather than just going, we've pre-created this thing for you, which I thought might be an interesting one to explore at some point.
Also, just if I can, sorry, if I can just very quickly jump in, an example of an approach that we've taken is, because of the nature of what rap music is, and because it's very much led by the lyrics of young people, just by putting a piece of music on, or real rap beat, which is a more relaxed beat, where it just implies, express more emotions that you're feeling. So many instances where young people who would really not want to engage in a lot of things are really expressing a lot, which they wouldn't want to say. And that's where it's not, here is a, exercise of a therapeutic exercise, but actually it's more impactful because it's culturally aligned with what they approach the kind of art form with. And that just inevitably results in, oh, I'm actually talking about some issues which I'm struggling to verbalize, but through a creative form I can.
Just from a research perspective, Alf Gabrielson did many, many years of research into performance and emotion. And what he found was that teaching his undergraduate musicians about emotion consciously gave them much more hold manageability of the musical material, perform music in lots of different ways to express particular kinds of emotions, because most of the time they didn't know that they had an emotional correlate for their music. So the question is not that we have to teach well-being, but we certainly have to teach about music and emotion in our music sessions. And one of the other things that came out more recently from colleagues in Jyväskylä in Finland is that sometimes young people, particularly adolescents, they actually like music which magnifies a negative emotion. When they're really feeling down, they sometimes want to listen to music which seems to make that, or at least from the outside, even worse, but actually is a cathartic response. It's a release of some of that kind of emotion.
To add to what Graham was saying, completely, that phenomena of using music just to listen to express their emotions is almost, I feel particularly nowadays, that kind of, here's an armor of, I'm not creating this, I'm not saying anything, but this reflects my feeling in a way which feels less exposing. I think that's a core element.
Just to respond to the question, really, which is just to say that if it is a part of the music education, it is part of a picture of music making and singing, which is part of the culture of the school. And if that's not in place, actually well-being is a good way in, because there's so much evidence about the value of it. It's as good a reason as any to get singing happening across the school or across a group of schools.
Great. And like so many evolutions or improvements in the way we do things to include people, it benefits everybody. So if we make our classrooms and schools places that nurture everyone's well-being, it benefits everybody, whether they thought they needed their well-being nurturing or not, I would think. We've got a question from Jeremy Sleeth, who is the chair of the Sing Up Foundation and on whose watch all of this work has been done, which is tremendous. So we're very grateful for that, Jeremy. And the question is, in the first case addressed to Benjamin, it is, what could the Sing Up Foundation seek to create that would enable others to recreate that safe, unedited place for young people to be themselves? Wonder what your thoughts might be on that.
I mean, I think the first thing is, I think Singapore already has some really a growing breadth of resources. I know we were involved in helping develop a rap resource just to make sure that there's a range of different kind of cultures reflected in the resource. But in terms of, and this kind of ties to another question that I saw around training for teachers or vocal coaches, and I think a lot of it comes down to just training programs, but not necessarily in the sense of we need to understand this element or this element of well-being. It's around the need for cultural humility, I think, is a really important aspect. I feel also the positionality of the teacher in terms of, and this kind of links to the repertoire question as well. There have been times where I know I could make, and I use that word very specifically, a group of young people do a choir performance song because I am a teacher who they respect and they're going to engage and they're going to do this, and I can list all the benefits. But the moment that I can allow myself to pause and just think, why this versus what they might want to do instead? What is it that I'm actually trying to teach? Is it that I am trying to open the breadth of different music available to them? Or is it that I'm actually, my view of breadth of music is my music adding onto there as well? Actually, within their breadth of music, there is so much to be explored. It's like the perspective of, so many young people want to be the next Stormzy or want to be the next pop artist, but they don't know how to get there. And yet often what we do is we think, okay, we need to expand beyond that when we haven't even covered the core part of what they're really passionate about. So I think a lot of it comes down to just our approach and particularly the cultural humility.
And Celi, I believe we have a question. Is that right?
Lacey Jam says, kids in my classes up until the age of 8 to 9 are quite receptive and do call and response, learn songs in foreign languages, etc. However, after age of 9, and obviously around puberty, 11 to 12 years and on, the age of shame kicks in, and it's extremely tough to have students engaged, even if they might enjoy the music. Do you have any suggestions? So that's from Lacey Jam.
I think it chimes with what we said earlier and what the report says, is that there will be some music somewhere that resonates with that particular individual. Most young people will listen to music. Some of them, the research tells us, up to 5 hours a day. So that if there is music which makes sense for you, then part of the role of the adult is to find out, explore what that music is, or to provide a very large, if you like, menu of activities so that this music kind of pops up. Every child, young person, I think, will have some kind of musical hook. The challenge for us is to discover what it is.
I mean, I think the primary to secondary shift is a significant and quite long-term issue. Like, it's been a thing for a long time, that kind of drop off in engagement. And I think ultimately, from what I've found, it comes down to a core principle, which is the social cost, and that being a new thing that is developed. So in the primary school environment or younger environment, it's a very different cultural ecosystem to the secondary school environment, to being introduced to the digital environment. And suddenly the social cost of choice is massive. It's the reason why in year 7, it's the reason why in every school that I've taught in, our choir is mostly year 7. And then you've got a couple of year 9s and year 10s in it. And then for the most part, they're either there as the excellence example or the leadership example. So they almost have an excuse to be part of the choir because they need to have something to balance the social cost. And that massive shift there of just being aware of how you're viewed and aware of what it means. But in terms of kind of approach to it, I think a big part as well is the need that young people have, and I think many people have, but particularly in the modern world that they're growing up in, is that need for success and that need for quality. And a lot of the time, kind of mediocrity is kind of the lens through which we approach a lot of music programs. While what I've found with a lot of the programs we've done is we need to start from a space of here's excellence and we're going to go for this excellence. Doesn't mean we're actually intending that for young people. It's almost like, okay, right, I can now allow the social cost of being involved in this just because it's presenting itself as an excellent program, even though we all kind of know this is just a space for you to create and to have fun. And so I think that kind of, right, this is an excellence thing. And then also, of course, giving them ownership. I really think youth ownership, more than leadership, more than voice, but actual ownership is a massive part of the shift required.
And I'm really interested to hear you make that connection between, as it were, bridging that transition and excellence. And I think it just behooves us to remember that we should never underestimate young people's own discernment and own capacity to choose. And somebody somewhere in the report, and I can't remember which person, but one of the many excellent quotes in the report is about basically you can't pull a fast one on young people. They will discern inauthenticity. And so, I think one of the other things about is to show up with what you love and are willing to share, and also to be willing to receive from the young people, so that you're not pretending to like something if you don't like it as well. I think young people value response that is honest and debate that is honest, and quality in whatever the thing is well understood by young people and sought after by young people, because it makes us feel good to be able to do something well. This is, we're now talking about, if you like, a much broader pedagogical view, which is to do with how teaching and learning can best happen for everybody.
So Kathy's question is, are we able to authentically support facilitators, teachers, music specialists to develop a real trauma-informed approach? How can we ensure that practice is trauma-informed? Are there enough training courses or guides? Do we have enough adult resource to support groups truly to ensure that a setting is safe?
So, trauma-informed practice.
I can quickly respond on trauma-informed, and I think for the foundation there is a role in that as part of a portfolio of things we might be able to offer. But that's a partnership thing, and when I've worked in for example with care experienced young people, the courses that always sold out were the trauma-informed ones. So there is a desire as well as a need for that, and I think that's something we can straightforwardly build in as part of an offer.
Great. And I'm just going to follow that up actually with Emily Bell's question, which is, what training do you think vocal leaders and singing teachers should be getting as a bare minimum, even if their practice isn't centered around well-being? So it's, how do we build this up? Graham, Benjamin, any thoughts?
Well, I mean, my first thought was, I wonder what the correspondence is between the report and the pyramid and the main Sing Up set of resources. So I think there's probably picking up Jeremy's point that there's a kind of useful mapping that could go on there to see whether the resources are rich enough to work across the pyramid. And I think the word trauma then for me is focusing on particular aspects of the pyramid. And as Baz said, that really needs to be worked out with professionals who are experts in that field, in which you bring in the singing professionals together and say what's needed. And that group should also have some practitioners and saying, well, this is where we're coming from. But you could have a very fruitful, I think, positive engagement in taking the agenda forward in that way.
And I would say that the question of support, training and development, continuing development and support for anybody working with singing and vocal practice more widely with young people is a question that needs constant attention. It doesn't just need attention in the particular case of singing for mental health. It just needs attention because it slips off the agenda and slips off the agenda. Paradoxically, perhaps because we do all have a voice, it somehow feels like it's the thing that is least attended to in teacher education because it's least valued. Benjamin, any thoughts about trauma-informed or related topics?
Yeah, the model that we take is that all of our young leaders who are now working in schools with young people are alumni of our program, which I think just highlights that that kind of relational aspect is so crucial. They might not have had the same training as other teachers or as myself, but they're much better skilled because they're starting from who they are and what they are bringing in relation to young people. Now, that's definitely not me saying that you cannot be completely culturally different to the young people you support. I'm very culturally different to all the young people that I'm working with. But I also think the framework that the report has, do, know, be. I think, if anything, I'd say really starting with that be, with that understanding of who you are in that space, and then adding on with the know. I think it's that, like I've said a few times, that cultural awareness and that really understanding where am I bringing myself and my values versus where am I supporting this problem. Right now, we've been having a lot of conversations about masculinity, and a lot of the time we have to keep pausing to think, at what point are we addressing a harm versus are we trying to shift towards our values? And I think that that's just really important for anyone in a position of power, with especially young people, to be thinking, what is the healthy norm that we're aiming for, rather than where are we bringing our ideal into it. Not trying to say ideals are wrong, but just trying to make sure we understand where we are crossing that boundary, which can be a positive thing as well, but just being aware of that.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. And I'm just going to read out the point that Jeremy Sleeth has just made in the chat on this point of training and support for staff. I think we have a responsibility for support and supervision of our staff in the same manner as those working in mental health within the NHS get. This will take a shift in employer working practice in some cases, especially in the mainstream, and maybe a place that we could collectively lobby for. And earlier on, there were some questions and comments about policymakers and funders who absolutely would need to come into this conversation. I'm just going to give you one question, Benjamin, which is a question of factual definition. Can you just clarify for some of our viewers, what is the difference between youth ownership and youth leadership?
Ooh, I've not actually been asked that many before. Yeah, no, that's a great question. I would say youth leadership is being responsible for others. It's being a leader. And that's why you can have a program which is a young person doesn't really love, but they can be a leader within it. And ownership is essentially, this is mine. This is my thing that
Right.
I'm building, that I'm part of. And it is, I think, quite a significant difference between the two.
Right.
But yeah, that's essentially, in a nutshell, the difference.
Great, thank you. And I guess just to further complicate the picture, I would perhaps throw in the word agency there. So at what point is a young person feel an agent or the creator, curator, or leader of their own experience? And I guess my take on all of what we've heard to date is that we're in continuum land with all of these things. It's about, I think one of the early youth music, National Foundation for Youth Music resources, offered an idea about a kind of a mixing desk, old-fashioned, analog mixing desk approach to pedagogy, which is you need some of this and you need some of that, and in some situations you need more of this and you might need a bit less of that, and how we think about the mix that we need for the young people we're working with, and how we think about the mix of what we need for ourselves as practitioners, perhaps is a big question for us to go forward with. Huge research agenda unfolding, Graham and all colleagues who might help to support developing and funding that research agenda. Huge training, support and development agenda. Similarly, anyone who's got some help to offer and how we might build that, and a conversation unfolding. What is one thing that you're going to go and do as a result of being involved in this conversation, or you would suggest someone else might like to go and do? Could be reading, doing, connecting with, finding out about, touching into.
Well, one of the challenges with the research is that we know that as children get older and become adolescents, they often become musically more competent, but become more unhappy. And so one of the challenges, I think, that I'm continuing to research is how we can use music and singing as that preventative measure.
Great.
And I think there's a lot of research that we need to continue to do that, particularly with young people in that transition, as Benjamin said,
Yeah, we're already doing a lot of research into this, so I would welcome any researchers, obviously Graham yourself. I'd love to be in conversation. We're exploring the exact things you talked about. And just a challenge I'd say for everyone is to really change the lens we're looking at young people and to maybe consider how much are they disengaging and how much are they adapting to a new environment that they're living in. And how much of that is reflected, I think, in that report it's all quite clearly there. But it's just how can you change the lens and start looking at what they're doing as adapting?
Great, thank you.
All right. Well, that was such an amazing conversation, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And I think there's loads of stuff that we can keep coming back to there. I was really taken by what Ben was saying about excellence. And sometimes we think about this work as maybe focusing on other outcomes. But he was saying that young people feel like they have permission to participate in something where they feel it's got quality. It's not going to be a thing where they're going to be exposed or embarrassed, but they can really kind of be proper musicians in it. And that's really important to keep in mind, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that was said in the conversation that was just incredibly well put. But I also really loved the whole conversation about the importance of an unedited space. And, what role can we all take in helping to give that unedited space to young people because of the environment that they're living in now? I thought that was just such a incredible way to look at things because I hadn't
Yeah.
thought about it before.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose part of that picks up on what Katherine was saying about like, what is the role of the music itself? Like, do we just allow it to kind of unfold how it wants to? Or is there a way of structuring what the music actually is and what it's about that's valuable here? That's a conversation for us to pick up in future, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, and also wider than that, it's really interesting for us to consider too how this whole conversation might have an impact upon wider arts spaces and other forms of art that young people are involved in and creativity. I liked a lot that Benjamin was talking about how we need to take a moment to respect the culture of young people because so often in these conversations we're not taking a moment to really respect the culture that they already have ingrained within them. And I thought that was such an important kind of note to keep reminding us all of that.
Yeah, it was. I think at a bigger level as well, there were things that we can start to respond to that go in line with some of the policy shifts that are coming out from government, trying to find a way through this crisis for children and young people's mental health and well-being. And so, the sort of extracurricular stuff, the importance of an enriched educational experience, singing and vocal work have a really valuable role to play there. It's one of the most accessible ways that people can get involved.
Yeah.
So lots to pick up. Yeah.
And also, one last thing, it was great to hear as well, Graham, really highlighting some of the research that's coming out, like right now, new stuff. The thing that he was saying about that there's a new piece of research that shows that it actually doesn't even matter how good the singing itself is, but it's just participating that is having a real impact on the well-being of young people.
Yeah.
And that's brand new research, isn't it?
It is, and there's a really interesting tension between that and what Benjamin was saying about excellence, isn't there? It's like, well, what feels right, and that flexibility that the practitioner needs to have to navigate that is really kind of a lot about what this is about, isn't it? And what we're hoping to provide some more guidance on.
Yeah. So, and that's perfect segue into talking about the fact that we're going to be doing some more webinars, aren't we? And we're hoping that our next webinar will be in July, and it will be really starting to focus on the Do No Be framework and talking about the practitioner, talking about what practitioners need to be able to deliver this work well.
Yeah.
So we're really hoping people come and join us for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can, if you go to singupfoundation.org, you can find the report. It's a relatively long report. It's very rich, 40 pages long, but we're going to be breaking it down online so that you can get in and find the bits that work for you. But have a go reading the whole thing, I would say.
Yeah. And please, let us know what you think. Let us know your thoughts. Tell us if you've got new ideas coming up, if you want to join our webinars, if you want to send in some questions. We'd just love to get this conversation started, really.
Yeah, the more voices that are part of it, the better, I think.
Thanks so much for listening in with us today.
See you next time.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Inspiring Voices. Please remember to subscribe and leave us a review on Apple or Spotify.
Please also consider donating to support the work of the Sing Up Foundation.
Subscribe on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube, or your favorite podcast platform.
Videos of each episode are also available on the Sing Up Foundation YouTube channel. For more about us, to access our library of resources, or to donate to support our work, please visit singupfoundation.org.
Many thanks to Becky Owen and the Refuge for our beautiful podcast music, specially arranged by Becky and adapted from their song, An Enemy.